those are the people I truly serve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Magnus Panvidya. Magnus is a Boogaloo boy, and we get into all sorts of topics on the media disinformation, most of all. I'm sure all of you that listen to my podcast will really enjoy this interview. I had a lot of fun talking to Magnus, and I plan on having him on a lot in the future to talk about historical events, because that's what he is really into. If you're looking for a background on Magnus, this is not the podcast for you. I would suggest you go to Unregistered and listen to Thaddeus Russell's interview with Magnus, which was excellent. But before we get into the interview with Magnus Panvidya, I have to remind you, any of your needs when it comes to graphic design, go to ryanbunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a good friend of mine. He has designed the logo for my podcast, and he has also designed the cover for my upcoming book of stories, short stories, fiction short stories. I am speaking off the cuff here. So, anyway, I'd like to thank Tom Burton for the music, and I would like to thank all of you for your support. Continue to share the podcast. Our listenership is increasing every episode, and it is awesome. I am loving this. So please share 2, 3, 4, 5 people. You know somebody who wants to hear this stuff or needs to hear this stuff. Go rate, review, and donate to all your favorite podcasters. libertarianinstitute.org /donate is still having the fund drive, and you have matching donations at this point. If you're looking to donate to me, go to paypal.me /Tommy Salmons. Anyway, thank you, man. I really appreciate every single one of you. I really do. And I'm having a blast.
All right, I am here with Magnus Panvidya. What's going on, man?
Not much, just enjoying the weather. Got so many things kind of going at once right now. Been real busy and just excited about the state of the world at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of white pills going on right now. I just sometimes it gets easy to get caught up in the nihilism and just be like, oh, this is fucking hopeless. I don't even know why I do this shit. But then you see a story run across, the screen or something, and you're like, that's why. That's what we're doing, So
definitely, like, one of the biggest white pills for me is kind of being embraced by like leftist Twitter and watching them just like rail against the Democrats and like call bullshit out and go after like corporations for being fake woke. And I'm like, this is like the left. So I'm like, yes, this is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what, I think I might come at things from a little bit more right point of view than you do, but we have a lot in common. You know what I'm saying? Because the ultimate goal is to free ourselves and as many people as we can,
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely like my main thing that I talk about all the time is we're kind of in a point in this country where it's like the country is the big tent and we're all inside it. And we're arguing with each other all over all this petty shit while this giant bear that is the federal government is just tearing the tent apart and slashing us. And we're just being like, well, I want to sleep on that side of the tent. I think we should put the heater over here while we're all, being spied upon and murdered and taxed to death. So it's like, let's just put aside all this bullshit for a moment and just deal with these problems.
Right. Yeah. So for those of y'all who don't know who Magnus is, he's been in the news, well, not really in the news, but he's been going around in the podcast world, at least, because he gave a speech in front of the Capitol in Michigan. Is that
Yep,
right?
that was the steps of the Lansing State Capitol.
Yep. And that speech went kind of viral. And I saw the speech and I was like, yeah, this dude makes some fucking sense. And then you went on Jimmy Dore and I was like, I like this guy. So I was like, so I immediately reached out to you and we've been trying to figure it out ever since, how to get you on the podcast and when we could work it out, but we got it figured out. So Magnus is one of the dreaded terrorists of the Boogaloo movement.
The evil Hawaiian shirt wearing, meme posting white supremacist organization, the Boogaloo.
Okay. So,
and it's funny because they don't realize that like that's almost kind of the point, because we knew that they would slander us. So like we make the words the Boogaloo boys come out of their mouths over and over again, and they have to like describe to people what we are. And a lot of like people that aren't super plugged into the matrix go like, wait, this is stupid. And it's like, yes, it's the point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, what was your reaction the first time you heard like Brian Stelter say Boogaloo?
It was almost as bad as like the CNN interview where they were like the hacker known as 4chan. Like I was rolling when I saw it.
All right.
Because they're so cool. They're such boomers. They're so clueless. They have no idea how the internet works. They can't figure out any of these movements. They just try to like staple on these really basic, like, you know, pre-cell phone era ideology onto like post-internet political movements.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I always just thought it was a big joke. Like I'd see the memes going around and I'd laugh at them and I'd share them and, you know, yada, yada.
Yeah,
yada.
that's all how it pretty much started. Was
Right.
it was just meme culture.
Right. But it was nothing to me. And then I heard there was this chick I knew that was a leftist, and she started saying, oh my God, these white supremacist Boogaloo boys. And I was like, you do realize it's a fucking joke, right? Like, it's not real. It's not real. And then y'all started marching, and I was like, okay, I guess it is real. You know?
Yeah, and that was after the Duncan Lemp situation that all came to be, where it kind of went from like meme and prepper, because there obviously was like kind of like a sort of movement-ish before we were on the streets, but it was more like prepping and training and like, you know, nothing to do with activism really. Right. The activist side of it came into being after Duncan Lemp. And it's so funny to people, like it, like if you want to break the conditioning on that whole narrative that we're white supremacists, just Google Boogaloo memes and scroll through hundreds of pages and tell me if you find a single one that references race at all. It's all about throwing IRS employees into the Boston Harbor and like training bears and monkeys how to use guns. Like nothing to do with any of that. So
yeah. So okay, so give us a little background for those that have only heard the mainstream narrative of what the Boogaloo boys are. Give us a little background. Tell us what the Boogaloo movement is.
Okay, so it's kind of just like a new iteration of kind of what like the anonymous movement and all that happened, of just very, very decentralized, very politically diverse group of individuals that are mostly armed, that just think we've hit a point in the country where if you point at any single issue, if you point at any single institution or government organization, there's giant fucking problems. And it's kind of just like the basic idea of it is shit be fucked, and that the government is going to eventually come after us, which they are, and we're probably going to have to end up defending ourselves from it. And that's kind of the whole idea of the Boogaloo is a second revolution. In a lot of the early memes, it was from gun confiscation. The whole meme was when the cops come to take the guns, the Boogaloo kicks off. And that's kind of where that started. And it's evolved further and further to where different people in the different parts of the movement have more pet like political issues. Like I'm really involved with like the BLM and the left and AFA, to where there's other guys that are like more focused on guns. There's other people that are more focused on anti-war. but it's all just this general anti-government movement that is really spread across the political compass, and like also what our goals and objectives are.
Right. What did you feel slighted when John Brennan mentioned nativist, fascist, 3%ers, libertarians, but he didn't mention Boogaloo?
Yeah, no, but that's funny though, because just yesterday, the director of the FBI was on CNN, not only talking about, like, not only did he say that the Capitol siege, the Portland courthouse siege, and the Chaz were all acts of domestic terrorism and all identical to each other. So essentially everybody, we're all the same to them. But then he also went on to try to tie the Boogaloo movement to Islamic terror, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
He's like they're working with Islamic terrorist groups to destroy America.
Wasn't there a couple of guys that were trying to either sell weapons or something like that?
So yeah, there was 2 guys in Minneapolis that were approached by an undercover FBI agent pretending to be a member.
Always an undercover FBI agent.
Yeah, he was pretending to be a member of Hamas, and they sold him solvent traps.
Oh, okay.
And that's what they arrested him for. So literally for buying a item that you can get off of Amazon that with just a drill you can turn into, a suppressor.
Yeah.
That's what they picked them up on, for arming and funding Hamas. They conveniently leave out that there was no Hamas. It was just an FBI agent the whole time.
Well, and that's like the whole the kidnapping of the Michigan governor. What Gretchen,
instigated by the FBI, involved with the FBI, several agents, and a lot of people forget how far this goes back to, where I always bring up the Viper militia in Arizona and what happened to them, to where they got picked up on accusations of wanting to blow up courthouses and assassinate people and kidnap the governor, which was the same thing. And then it came out like months and months later, after almost all of them walked with no charges, that it was the FBI that were pushing them to do this and lying about this and trying to instigate members. And it even goes as far as the informant admitted that he tried to get them to adopt white supremacist literature, and the militia voted it down. But then the ATF tried to call them a white supremacist organization, when that never even got brought up amongst their members until the Fed tried to, push it on them.
Yeah.
It's like, Das Lady, project too much.
Well, right. I mean, you can go back and look at Ruby Ridge. That was all a setup, Timothy,
we stopped our own terror attack. That's what the FBI does.
Timothy McVeigh was part of the MK Ultra program, and he comes out, and half the people he was involved with in the militia were FBI agents. Like all these militia groups are made up, like probably 50% of them are FBI anyway.
Yeah, we even joke about it, like we're all feds. I'm a fed. Everyone in this movement's a fed. We even make memes about it, because it's usually the case of like everyone's a fucking FBI agent.
I hope Alex Jones doesn't hear this episode.
No, and it's so funny, because in regards to that, his fans were suspicious of me and said that I was an FBI agent, but the other Boogaloo boy that they brought on has been recently kicked out of the movement for working with the FBI, and he was the one.
That was the guy I thought was an agent. I was
exactly.
This guy sounds like a fucking fed.
Yeah, I'm the one that's like, work together, be peaceful, but if you have to defend yourself, do it. And then other dudes like, revolution, take action now, blah blah blah. And I always go to Spike Cohen's infamous quote on exactly that subject and that individual, that if anyone asks you to take accelerationist or violent actions, they're either an idiot or a federal agent.
Exactly.
It's so true.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But this brings us right into the disinformation, because I mean, we've kind of discussed the disinformation around the Boogaloo movement. When you've been on the ground, nobody. Okay, where was I? Oh, okay, disinformation.
So, on the other organizations and stuff and everything that's going on, right?
Yeah. So like when you're out there at these protests, and you're seeing what's happening around you, how many of these have you seen get out of hand where you have these riots? Because there's obviously been, these crazy stories that come out, like mostly peaceful protesters, but fiery or some shit like that. And you're like, right. What the fuck are you talking about? This is fucking crazy.
Yeah. And I actually have a mild conspiracy about that I'll go into later, about what actually the left media is doing to go after the left through doing shit like that. But yeah, I've been to 2 events personally that have kind of gone sideways, and then I've have close friends with somebody who was on the ground the first night in Detroit, and I had people that were actually in Kenosha at the gas station that I was like in live contact with while all that was happening.
Right.
And then I've also been at tons of events where it was completely peaceful. So I've kind of seen something very different than what either side of the media is painting, whether it be the right wing or the left wing, of like what's actually going on.
Okay. So, well, tell us what you've seen. Tell us what your theories are and what you've seen happening.
Yeah. So essentially every single group that is involved, whether it be the Proud Boys, whether it be BLM, whether it be, anti-fascist organizations or the Boogaloo Boys, it's all infinitely more decentralized than the media makes it seem to be. For example, just in Michigan, there is 6 different BLM organizations, 2 of which fucking hate each other. Won't even be in the same room as each other. None of them have a tie to the national organization at all. A lot of them don't like the national organization. And it's kind of like the conservatives don't understand that a lot of these organizations are formed out of like some random person being like, well, I'm going to go start a BLM event. And then they get like 15 of their friends together and it builds from there to where it's much more organic. And the same goes with anti-fascist organizations, where you have this kind of image being painted of them that they're all these like radical tanky communists that want to destroy America, to where, yeah, there are groups that feel that way. But like my local group are like a bunch of like anarcho-socialists that like go to Trump protests and blast WAP and breakdance and shit, and don't do anything. So like it's way more complicated, to where definitely like I don't think the media has explicitly lied about a lot of groups. They have in some cases, but like more often or not, they're leaving out a lot of important details of what's actually going on and how decentralized this is, and how like different BLM groups will march for different reasons. Like a lot of the events that happened over this summer, you had people that had Breonna Taylor signs and George Floyd signs and everything, but that's not why they were marching. They were marching because someone in their local community got killed. And there's actually like more than a few places where they were marching for someone who was white or someone who was Hispanic, that wasn't even a black thing. Right. And even left-wing media will never talk about that. They'll film a protest in Lansing and be like, BLM protesting for George Floyd, when in reality they were out there for like Anthony Hoolan, which was a white dude who died in police custody in jail under mysterious circumstances.
Right.
So like the left-wing media even kind of like intentionally dilutes what's actually happening and what people are actually marching for. And I think it's kind of by design.
So how do you think they would benefit from that? Just like a divide and conquer strategy?
Yeah, just to increase the division, because then like it's feeding the right-wing media like talking points of like, oh, they're only out there for black people, they're a bunch of radical ethnic supremacists and all this blah blah blah, to where it became more of like, hey, this is a broad anti-police brutality movement, and yes, there are crazy racist people and the woke progressive type assholes that are running around and everything, but there's also a ton of very normal people that are actually addressing like real issues. And by ignoring that, it kind of fuels the divide that's going on in this country and makes it seem more like a left-right thing. Right.
Yeah, and it's much more a top-down. I like the way that Malice explains it as, the people versus the cathedral.
Yep.
It's all, and you listen to the way they talk. I mean, when they were talking about the January 6th event, and it was just like, what did they call it? Something of democracy. Oh, I can't. It was
assault on democracy or something like that.
No, it was like they invaded like the temple of
the temple of democracy.
I was like, what the fuck, man? That's not creepy at all.
Deep throat the boot just a little bit harder, like
right. Or I saw one person, they had a candle, those candles that has like,
it had like AOC and Bernie and like,
the
like
one I saw was
Barack
Stacey
Obama.
Abrams.
Oh
yeah. So it's just like, what the fuck, man? Right. This isn't a cult,
Oh yeah, it's totally not a cult at all. And a lot of people forget that like CNN's headquarters got besieged by BLM activists. Like they were like breaking the windows at CNN and like trying to like burn the building down. So like you'll hear like the left all the time be like progressives and their media allies, but then you kind of look at what's actually happening. It's like, no, like in Atlanta, they tried to like burn CNN down. Like they fucking hate the media too. And
Right.
that starts to ask you like, why do they hate the media? And then when you start asking that question, you go down like a deep rabbit hole that like lands you a lot closer to each other than they probably want you to know.
Right. Exactly. And then, so you were saying that some of these BLM and see, I've always tried to figure this out with the BLM and the Antifa organizations. I've always tried to like, cause I have friends that are on the left that like, I have a buddy of mine who's a anarcho-syndicalist and he's not involved with the Antifa movement, but he knows a lot of people that are.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always tried to have the conversation with him about it, like from an honest point of view, because we're buddies, you know, and I trust him and I know he's not going to lie to me. And he's like, yeah, it's not a single thing. And I'm like, all right, I get it's not a single thing. But if it's several different organizations acting in violent ways in many cases, and a lot of times it feels like a lot of these guys are kind of like the people that had interfered with the protests in Seattle in the 90s, right? They had
and they do have instances of infiltrators and people that are fake and people that, because you know, anyone can dress in all black and go to a protest and punch a Trump supporter, you know.
Right.
How would you ever know who that person is, you know?
Yeah.
And definitely that's the other thing when it comes to a lot of like people focusing on like Antifa committing violence and stuff against innocent people. A lot of that's in the Pacific Northwest, and that whole area is a shit show. But then again, they try to take like what's going on there and expand it across everybody. And even if that was accurate about like 80% of their movement, which I don't think it is, you're still intentionally leaving out a lot of people that aren't like doing that. And that's not their objective. There is actually like a whole branch of like anti-fascist organizations that I talk to on regularly that get absolutely annoyed, and they're like, I want to stop, like we need to stop counter protesting. Like, why are we focusing so hard on yelling at random Trump supporters when the government's doing all this like fucked up shit? Like we should be doing that more. We should be doing anti-ICE protests more. We should be doing all this more. So like even with like, it's so much more complicated, you know, than people try to boil it down to be like the simple thing.
Right. And well, I think your movement, I think the Boogaloo movement is doing it right. You know, what I really had of a problem with and I've heard that some of the riots aren't even taking place near where the protests are.
That's actually a lot of them.
That the protests are on like one side of town and the cops are over there like policing the protests, and therefore it leaves a completely open area on the other side of town where these rioters are like burning down shit and fucking, you know, looting, robbing places.
Right. And whatever they'll run in front of a camera and yell George Floyd or BLM or something, but they're opportunists. Like they have nothing to do with the protests or whatever. And there's nothing really the protesters can do about that except for not protest. And even there's not even really too much the cops can do about that, because like I would prefer that they weren't like being antagonistic with protesters. But at the end of the day, like it becomes a manpower issue to where like Chicago is the perfect example of the police retreated to the like upper downtown area and essentially left all the neighborhoods wide open. And that's where 90% of the rioting happened. And you had like the Latin Kings and shit having to run around and grab people that were trying to break into businesses, you know, like, so like the gangs had to like police their own neighborhoods because the cops all disappeared.
Right.
And a lot of people forget like all this is coming off of 6 months of lockdown. So you know, you have bar fight Kyle that usually goes to the local bar and gets blackout drunk and punches someone for looking at his girlfriend. He hasn't been able to do that in 6 months. Right. But all of a sudden all the cops are gone and there's people fighting with the police, and you know, he's running in and breaking into the local Target to get some shoes. You know, and then and again, to my conspiracy, like the right-wing media will run out and say they're BLM protesters. And then the left-wing media will not only defend these opportunists, but then they'll also tie them to the BLM movement. And that's like, that pisses off a lot of people in the movement, even to where they're like, stop doing that, you know?
Yeah.
And you'll get the blue check marks on Twitter being like, looting is the voice of the oppressed or something like that. And it's like, stop.
Those people,
and even people in BLM are like, that's bullshit. What the hell are you talking about? You know?
Right. Yeah. Like why would and here's my thing. And this is why I got so irritated with the Antifa crowd last year, is because I was like, you're a bunch of fucking, wealthy, upper middle class white kids who are overeducated and bored, and you're going and you're burning down these fucking urban centers and these really impoverished neighborhoods where this 80-year-old black man who owns the liquor store didn't do a goddamn thing, and then you have these people defending it saying, well, they're just part of the capitalist system. Well, I don't give a shit. That dude didn't fucking do a goddamn thing.
Yeah, and there's definitely extreme elements like that in Antifa, just like there's extreme elements in my movement that are crazy accelerationists that fucking like want war and shit,
Right.
But even then, I don't think it's a majority of it or a majority of them. Like there's an individual I speak to all the time that goes by the name John Brown, and he's like a left-wing libertarian that was at the Wall of Dads at the Portland courthouse siege. He would fit right in at like a Spike Cohen rally or something like that, but he walks around with Antifa. So it's like, it's a little weird when you actually start like digging in and asking questions. And the other thing you'll notice about the media is they never actually let them talk to the camera. If you'll notice that, like you'll never see an interview with an anti-fascist organization on CNN or anything like that. They never put a camera in them. It's always like detached. And I think it's because if you actually like heard a lot of the things they were saying, you'd be like, whoa, hold up a second. And the best example of that was when I brought my friend Star, who was part of Portland AFA. She was at the Chaz and shit like that, onto Alex Jones, and they were talking about like the deep state and like the military industrial complex and like the new world order and like and here's an anti-fascist person and Alex Jones like agreeing on like 90% of like the shady shit that's going on. They have radically different solutions to those problems, obviously, right? But like they both are accurately identifying the same problems, and you would never know that because you never actually get to hear these people speak outside of the Twitter crowd, and the Twitter crowd is such a inaccurate representation of almost every single political movement. Like Twitter is just a shithole. Yeah, so
it's a cesspool, man. All right, so you had told me that you were at a rally with Maj. So tell us a little bit about that rally.
Yeah, so we like right at the beginning of the Unity movement, kind of what happened is the Department of Homeland Security released a memo that was going into domestic extremists in America. And there's a famous image going around where it literally has the anti-fascist flag right next to the Boogaloo Boy igloo in the memo. And that kind of like sent a shockwave throughout the movement of like, oh fuck, like maybe maybe we should talk to these people and try to get something going. So we organized a Unity rally in Lansing where we invited like everybody, like if Proud Boys can come down, 3%ers can come down, anti-fascists can come down, BLM come down. We're all going to sit here and we're going to have a talk. And Maj actually was like, I'll be there. And Maj jumped on a fucking plane and, flew over there and gave a speech, and it was super awesome. And we got to talk to him. And that was actually where I met my local Lansing anti-fascist contact. And now me and her are like best friends. And that's kind of where the idea of the Unity Coalition was birthed out of, was that event.
Right.
And we were interviewed by RT. We were interviewed by a bunch of people, which was great because actually like we had barely like 60% of the people that were there were white and straight. The rest were like open, like POC, like open, like gay guys, lesbian women, like just very extraordinarily diverse group. And every single media organization was like allergic to filming them, which is funny because like my best friend Darius, he's like 6'7", like huge black dude, and like he was in none of their pictures. But really? Our RT, which was the funniest, RT went there and he had like a crazy like blue like flak jacket bulletproof vest on and shit because he was, I don't know, Russians. And he was walking around and he actually like filmed and talked to a lot of like our minority members and stuff. And he actually made the very salient point of like, wow, there's an awful lot of, black people for a white supremacist organization. So that whole event was funny. Right? Oh yeah, or they're useful idiots, or we hide behind our POC membership to mask our white supremacist ideals, or any of this other multiracial white supremacy, all these other fucking cope.
Yeah, well, and see, here's the thing that I see a lot of libertarians, at least on my side of the movement. I'm more around the ANCAP side of the movement. Right. And I see that they make the mistake of they disbelieve the media on everything except for Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
Right. And that's the main thing I've said to everybody, like even the people on the left. I'm like, go on the ground and talk to these people. Do not believe anything. Like, go find your local organization and sit down and have a fucking conversation with them, because it's so wildly different to where 3%ers in Louisville actually marched with BLM, to where the 3%ers in the Pacific Northwest keep like getting caught having like actual neo-Nazis in their movement. Right. So that's like that's why I always tell people, like, my Proud Boys might not be Portland Proud Boys or Texas Proud Boys. My Antifa might not be Oklahoma Antifa. You know, like, actually go out and talk to these people and try to get like a real feeling. And I guarantee you're going to start to like make some connections of, oh, I think we've been lied to about fucking everything.
Now there is, I guess it's the National Black Lives Matter. One of the founders, she had come out and said that she was a trained Marxist, and a lot of people just have clung onto that, and they kind of they want to make the association with every Black Lives Matter organization, and they'll specifically say, well, I'm not against the movement, I'm against the organization. And
which is most of the movements against the organization. They rant and rail about how they get all this money and it never actually goes into the Black community, and that they constantly shill for the Democratic Party. And like, a lot of people in the BLM movement hate the fucking organization.
Right.
You know?
Right. So and like you said, like all of these movements, whether it's the Boogaloo, the Proud Boys, well, I think the Proud Boys are a little bit more centralized.
Yeah, they definitely, like, there is a little bit more wiggle room with them, but they are the most central. Yeah, they're the most centralized out of all of kind of the political players going on right now. Them and the 3%ers are probably like the two most centralized, and then you go down to where like Antifa and Boogaloo are on the very bottom of being like totally decentralized, borderline no leadership structure kind of thing.
Well, I was watching the Anthony Cumia show whenever Gavin McInnes came up with the idea for the Proud Boys. And it was a lot like the Boogaloo movement. It was a fucking joke.
It became a lot more centralized and spooky under Tario, though, which Tario turned out to be a fucking Fed.
Yep.
So, like,
and he can't go to Canada, which is funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's hilarious. So yeah, definitely, like, it changed and metastasized from kind of like a joke into like a militant, like, fucking Trumper conservative movement.
Yeah, but one of the things I've always said about the Proud Boys is they're just a bunch of frat boy rejects. I mean, it's really nothing but a frat for middle-aged, overweight white guys.
Yeah, and like ask them what like their objectives or their goals are besides like keep Trump in power. It will be like a bunch of generic conservative stuff, and if you get that much out of anybody,
right? And
on average, if you talk to them, they're just there to get into fist fights with Antifa. Like, it's a fight club.
Yeah,
pretty much.
They're a bunch of fucking barroom brawlers, man. That's all they are. And all right, fine, whatever. I don't care. You know, you go out and mute. Like I'm a big believer in mutual combat. If y'all want to throw down, y'all go have fun.
Right. That's what I mean. Like a lot of people think that the Proud Boys that were at the Battle of Berkeley are what the Proud Boys are now, and it's like, no, they've changed radically. Because like the Battle of Berkeley was literally mutual combat. Like Antifa showed up and Proud Boys showed up, and they're like, let's fucking go, and then they beat the shit out of each other. So it's like, okay, you know,
okay,
power to you.
All right, you're gonna have to. Ugh.
Oh, puppy needs attention.
Yeah,
oh, it's a beautiful pet.
Oh, thank you. He doesn't like it when I'm talking and I'm not talking to him.
Oh yeah.
All right.
It's the same thing with cats. Every time I'm on a podcast, anyone has a cat, they're immediately like in the camera.
Yeah. Well, as soon as I start speaking, he wakes up. He's like, he's been napping. And as soon as I start talking, he wakes up and he's like, okay, where's my attention?
I'm a pretty boy though.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a big softie for animals, so I just can't help myself.
He's been riding with me since he was 5 weeks old. He's a road dog.
Trucker dog.
Yeah, he's an old road dog. He's 15 months now, 16 months.
He's a ham for 15 months. Jesus.
Oh yeah, he's a monster. He's about 80 pounds. a big old 80-pound lap dog.
Yep.
We got one at home with the wife too, one out of the same litter.
Nice.
Okay.
I want to get it. I want to get a dog really bad, but I just know that eventually my door is going to get kicked in by the ATF for some shit, and I just don't want to go through that.
Dude, I hope not, man. I don't want to
I
hear
really
that.
don't want to fucking go through that. I'll lose my mind.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear you going through that though, man. You seem like such a great, genuine guy. You know, like every interview I've heard you on and just talking to you now, I would hate to hear that. Yeah, but just that thought. You know, there's so many of us, you know, just doing a podcast like I do, you know, I think about it. I'm like, are they listening? You know, because I'm friends with Scott Horton. You know, he runs the Libertarian Institute, which is I post my podcast is where my podcast gets published. And he's also the editor at antiwar.com. And for years, I just found out like 2 years ago that the feds had been investigating a lot of the writers and editors of antiwar.com. Now, he came in after that, you know, after they had opened that investigation. But, you know, that's just like people that he was really close to, like Justin Raimondo and people like that were involved in that investigation. I was just like,
we all, like every single organizer in like big name in the movement got visited by the FBI or even DHS before the January 17th event. Like all of us got our doors knocked and they were like, hey guys, what you doing? We're keeping an eye on you. And it's like, fuck, man.
Right. And they tried to make it sound like that January 17th event was an extension of the January 6th event.
Which was so ridiculous because we planned that all the way back in like June.
Right. Well, I remember seeing the flyers going around and I looked at the flyers and I was like, dude, this looks like a psyop. Like no conservative, like, created that flyer.
And because they didn't, because it was a bunch of fucking libertarians, you know. Like,
well, and
but it kind of backfired in them though, because like they got to have me and my gaggle of village idiots, you know, my friend dressed up in a full Soviet officer's uniform with a Car 98, and me with like my rainbow flag and everything, like walk up in front of snipers, military helicopters, 7 Humvees, 40 National Guard, bike cops, horse cops, and 100 cameras, and I got to like walk up there and like give my speech. So
well, and that
kind of blew up in their face.
Yeah, that's kind of it did blow up in their face, and part of the reason it blew up in their face was our own damn fault because they made such a big deal about it. Everybody knew that something was going to happen on January 17th. All the capitals were going to be visited. They were all going to be raided. Everybody was watching. Everybody was waiting. Like, what happens? What's going to happen? You know, and I didn't know it was the Boogaloo movement doing it. I thought it was Trump supporters. I thought it was a MAGA thing.
And it was intentional that we didn't like put our name on it because a lot of our flyers were kind of targeted to different things. Like, and we kind of wanted an accidental meeting of minds. Like we wanted like everyone thinking like, oh, this is their event. And then they show up and it's like, wait, we're all here for the same thing. And it'd be like, oh shit, you know, because we had flyers that were more focused on police brutality. We had flyers that were focused on sexual abuse in prison. We had flyers that were, you know, focused on the Second Amendment. Like, because that's kind of our whole thing is just getting everybody to realize that they're being bent over a table by the government. And like, we should do something about it, you know?
Right. And I don't even know if your speech would have gone viral if they wouldn't have drawn so much attention to that date.
Probably not. And definitely like how we walked in definitely turned a lot of heads because I walked in with anti-fascists. I walked in with a BLM organizer, you know, like, so that definitely fucked them up mentally. And I wasn't even the only person that gave a speech. And then just the next day in January 18th, they had Rally Day or whatever it is in Virginia. And you had Black Panthers and like John Brown Gun Club and Boogaloo Boys and stuff all in Virginia doing the same thing. And that got a shit ton of media attention too. So it's like, good job. Thanks for creating our own press for you. Cause I almost assumed that it'd be like 6 idiots and a couple reporters and some cops. And then I showed up to like military occupation of the Capitol. It was like, oh shit. And I had a moment when I was walking out too of like, oh God, is today the day, you know, like, because we were supposed to have a lot more numbers, but people were worried that it was going to be like a Kent State 2 situation. You know, you have all these National Guard and cops all hyped up thinking someone's going to storm the Capitol and ended up fucking shooting people, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and you know, they've done a hell of a job since Trump lost the election to red pill people for us. They're certainly doing everything they can to show how corrupt and and crooked they are. To show how corrupt and crooked they are. And so when they did that, you know, it was another one of those situations where I looked at and I was like, you know, conservatives are going to be looking at this and they're going to be like, hold up, this isn't what we're still being lied to. Everybody's lying to us. You know, they turned on Fox News. Now they've turned on the police, you know, with the police enforcing these lockdowns, kind of letting these cities burn and just sitting around watching it. They stood around and watched the Chaz happen. And conservatives are like, wait a second, we can't even trust you people. And then these red flag laws are coming down and they're saying, oh, the police will never enforce that.
And then they enforce it.
And then they enforce it. And the biggest name, and we were talking about this before, and I believe you said you knew Duncan Lemp. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I wasn't like super close or personal with him. We just all ran in similar circles, just being in the gun community. So like, you know, I'd had like conversations within groups with him and stuff like that, but not like, I will never go as far as say we were best friends or anything like that.
Right.
Like he was just a member of kind of the general like militia, Second Amendment kind of community.
Yeah. And so we had this situation where Duncan Lemp is in bed next to his pregnant girlfriend. And there's a rifle of some sort. And I Jim Bovard's done a lot of reporting on this. If you want to read some good stories about the information that is slowly leaking out on the Duncan Lemp situation, I would suggest you read anything Jim Bovard has written about it. He's very good, and he lives in the same area, so he knows how the police operate in this area. So he's asleep next to his girlfriend. They decide they're going to conduct a no-knock raid.
Do we want to give the official police story or what actually happened that came out 7 months later? Because the difference between them is pretty important.
Okay, I don't remember the official police story. Do you want to tell us what that was?
Yeah, so the official police story is that they showed up in the middle of the night and that they slammed on the door, announced themselves as police, and then breached into the house. Right. And then went into the living room and got into the living room and then stopped at Duncan's door because apparently Duncan had a loaded shotgun booby trap over his bedroom door where his brother, his mom, and his pregnant girlfriend live.
Right. I remember this now.
Sure. And then that they entered Duncan's room and that Duncan was standing there with a rifle and that they demanded he drop the rifle and then he refused and then he raised the rifle and they shot and killed him. That is the police official story. What actually happened was that they showed up to his house in the middle of the night, blew his bedroom window out, and then immediately shot him through his bedroom window.
Right.
So like the immediate giant fucking lie from the police department there. And then they lied and said that there was no body cam footage of the raid at all, just to where a couple months ago, Freedom of Information request got a single still image of a SWAT officer's body cam standing over Duncan's dead body. So like they lied about that as well.
Well, I think what has come out, if I remember the way Jim Bovard had presented it, was that they are not required to run body cam while in conducting a raid. So it was after the raid was over and after the shooting had already taken place.
Correct. But they said there was zero footage whatsoever though.
Oh, okay.
Like they claimed that there was nothing before, after, there was no film, like video of the police being in there, and that was a lie.
And this was all because Duncan Lemp owned firearms.
Yeah, so the actual red flag warrant was put in because he was pictured. He posted a picture of his Instagram of him holding a replica. I forget what the exact model of was, but it was a kind of, you know, generic version, a ripoff version of a certain military rifle that's illegal to own in the United States. They saw this picture, they thought it was his gun, so they put in the red flag warrant. What it turned out to be was a perfectly legal version of that gun that he didn't even own at a range with his friends. So he literally just like took a picture, like, LARPing, Instagram glory shot picture of this rifle that wasn't even his. And that's what they got the red flag warrant off of.
Right.
So like if you've ever gone to a range and rented like, a fully automatic, AK or something because the range has licensing for it, and then you take a picture with it, well, the cops might use that as an excuse to red flag your house.
Right.
Which is fucking ridiculous.
And then they tried to say that some bullshit about he had one criminal offense whenever he was a minor, which is supposed to be sealed documents anyway. That was the reason he was not allowed to own firearms. And his family and his lawyer all deny that, and the official request during the trial to see what that charge actually was denied by the judge. So the family and his girlfriend and his lawyer all say that it's bullshit and he doesn't have a charge like that, and the court is like, well, he does have that charge, but we're not going to prove it. Yeah, we're not going to show you what it was.
Which again, like what could he have even done as a minor to prevent him from owning a firearm until he was 26 years old? Which is like,
well,
I can't even imagine.
And what kind of offense do you commit as a minor where your parents aren't contacted and informed about this?
Right. Which, yeah, it seems like it's ad hoc, like maybe being the most generous I could to the court system. Maybe he got charged with something, and then like after like years later, they changed it to where that offense means you can't own a firearm or something because laws do work in stupid spaghetti ways like that. Yeah. But even then, that's bullshit because he probably wasn't informed that he wasn't allowed to own rifles because he was an open member of the 2A community. He was part of the local 3%er organization. He had images dating back years and years of him shooting rifles, owning rifles, talking about owning rifles. So it's like, if really he wasn't allowed to, then why didn't the local PD grab him years ago? Right. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And then you had the Breonna Taylor situation, and both of these happened within the same week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was either 24 or 48 hours from each other.
Right. And Breonna Taylor, again, they were in bed, and the cops started trying to break down the door because for some reason they thought she might have drugs in the house because a guy she used to date is a known drug dealer. And her and her boyfriend come out in the hallway. As the cops breach the doorway, her boyfriend opens fire to defend their property, not knowing who's breaking into their house, and they shoot and kill Breonna Taylor. They come out saying, well, we announced ourselves. The boyfriend says he never heard them announce themselves. There was supposedly one neighbor said they knew that it was the cops because they heard the banging on the door and they looked out into the hallway, and the cops were like, go back inside, we're the police, so there was this whole argument over whether they announced themselves going in or not, whether they had a no-knock warrant or not, this, that, and the other. And come to find out, once again, the cops were in the wrong, did not announce themselves, and they did not have a no-knock warrant. They actually had a knock and announce warrant, which they did not do. And so it turned into a whole shit show.
And they tried to hang her fucking boyfriend, which is like a lot of people ask, like, why do you guys feel so personally involved with the Breonna Taylor thing as like white dude gun owners? And it's like, because he fired on someone breaking into his fucking house and they tried to take him to prison for it. That could be anyone. That could be any libertarian. That could be any conservative. Like, pick it,
That's right. I forgot about that part of the story.
Thankfully, the Kentucky Attorney General let him walk with no charges. Otherwise, like,
Yeah, they tried to strong arm. I remember reading the story that they tried to strong arm him into saying that Breonna Taylor was dealing drugs out of the apartment to justify the raid on the apartment.
Yeah,
and
it was
so
all bullshit.
They basically told him, if you admit that she was selling drugs out of the apartment, then we're not going to then we won't press charges against you for firing on a police officer or whatever. Yeah, just a total fucking hoax.
And he refused to, bless his heart. And if he would have done that, this whole story might have been buried and we would have never found the truth from it. It would have never went to trial, would have never pulled up all their dirty laundry. So, props to that guy. You're a fucking warrior. I'm glad you're free.
Yeah, anybody, and I've said this before, anybody that'll sit there and stare down the state, knowing that these people can totally ruin your lives. are fucking heroes, you know, like Chelsea Manning, you know, I mean, just, you talk about the balls on her, man. Just like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
you just tortured for 7 fucking years, you know, like just horrible. And, you know, or Julian Assange, you know, these people are fucking heroes.
Yep, and that's actually cool because the Action for Assange campaign actually bought me a plane ticket to go out on the 17th of this month to go to their free Julian Assange event in DC. So that's super
awesome.
Cool. They actually, and it's funny because it's a bunch of leftists running it. It's a bunch of like anarcho-socialists and like Jimmy Dore left people, and they're running the free Julian Assange campaign. So all the conservatives that are like the left doesn't care about free speech, like, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not the majority or the public, you know, popular side of the wing, but they exist in probably bigger numbers than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just not the vocal majority. That's pretty much what it is. The ones that actually are diehard free speech get banned off of Twitter and you never see them, you know, just like we do as libertarians, just like the conservatives, you know, anyone who licks the boot is allowed to exist, but anyone who actually like reasonably challenges the establishment gets disappeared off the internet. Right. You know? Well, and you were making a good point on a video you had posted a couple of weeks ago about how the feds will come after everybody, you know, and you kind of touched on it here earlier, but you like, can you repeat pretty much what you were saying there? Because I thought it was really interesting the way you put it.
Yeah. So like when the DHS was deputizing local police in Portland to grab like Antifa protesters, I told the conservatives, I'm like, do not be happy about this, because I saw all these Trump supporters be like, yeah, we're finally getting them, this is so good, you know, deputize everybody if you have to, fuck the local, you know, department, if they won't do the job, we'll just make the FBI do it. And I told them, like, don't cheer this on, because you're next. And sure enough, you now have billboards with FBI snitch numbers on every interstate in America, and they're going after and arresting people for even being in DC, like not even participating in the Trump rally. Even people are being grabbed just for being there. Right. And Bank of America is like handing over everyone's banking records to the feds if they were ever even in the Capitol on that day. And then I turned to the liberals and they're all cheering this on, like, yeah, go get those FUDs and those insurrectionists and everything. And I told them, like, you don't cheer this on either, because you're next. And sure enough, a guy named Daniel Baker in Tallahassee he's a open, like, John Brown gun club guy, super local BLM activist, really involved. The feds grabbed him for violating interstate telecommunication laws to incite a riot that never happened.
Hey,
it's like, yeah, dude, like they do not view us as these separate groups. They don't at all. Like, because
we're not the establishment, and that's what we all have to remember, you know. And at some point, you know, I sent you that. I don't know if you got to read the essay that I sent you, but there's that essay by Voluntary where she's talking about, you know, she calls it anarchism, but she wrote it in 1901. It's now become known as panarchy. Mm-hmm. In that, in an anarchist society, as all these groups, you know, voluntarily split up. Even Kropotkin, in his morals of anarchism, he talks about, you know, basically the voluntary, you know, association of anarchism, and let these people kind of have their thing. You kind of do your thing. Don't hold it against them. It's the power that you're actually against. That's the power. That's the problem. The hierarchy is what we're trying to fight. So what Voluntary is saying in this particular essay is that once the state is dissolved and there's no state, you'll have a system like you see in Tehran, right? In Tehran, Mexico, in the Michoacan province. Well, yeah. Tehran kicked out all the politicians, right? They created kind of a syndicalist, like mutualist society. But as time has gone on, and as they've started expanding their economy there locally, then some capitalism, you know, starts coming in, a little bit of capitalist enterprise, a little bit of the market, you know, economy starts moving in. So you get this situation where the mixed economy happens in a way that is natural. It's not like this forced mixed economy you have with a central bank, or,
yeah,
you know, and with these regulatory, you know, this regulatory capture and all this. This is just a natural progression of people voluntarily interacting and exchanging, and it's just the way it naturally occurs, as opposed to being forced down your throat.
And the same thing's going on with the Rehova. I think I'm saying it right, in Syria, to where, you know, the YPG and everything like that, to where they have a mixed system where essentially like you can own like capitalist version of property or a small business or whatever like that and participate in a market. And the way they handle it is then you're just denied access to the mutual network, but then you can do it. And if you want to become part of the mutual network, then you do more of like a syndicalist socialist thing. And and from people that I talk to this one guy all the time. He is actually like wanted for by the Turkish government for fighting with the YPG. Super cool dude. But he was talking about like, it's a beautiful like melody of like small mom and pop shops next to like, you know, communally owned worker co-ops. And they just, no government, like the police force is totally local. They have like, you know, all female fighting force in some instances that is like totally like super feminist and like, you know, very explicitly like left-wing feminist right next to like, you know, mom and pop shop, like more conservative Muslims and stuff like that. And they all just exist with no state force. So that's like, I'm all about that kind of evolution past the stupid ANCOM, ANCAP wars.
Yeah.
I just don't see the point of them, because if it's anarchy, then who fucking cares? You know?
Well, and I always say that the isms, and that's how I always say it. The isms are a creation of a state, of the existence of a state. It creates that tension between socialism, communism, capitalism, fascism. It's all a power dynamic that you're fighting. It's not the economic system you're fighting. It's the power dynamic, the power over the economy.
Yeah, my friend Mike Bobby put it great, of like essentially like the state is the barrel and we're all the crabs and we're pushing each other down to try to get to like out of the barrel. You remove the barrel and we're all free to like do whatever the hell we want. It forces a power struggle between all these groups when they would normally just like leave each other the hell alone.
Right.
And there's anarcho-communist communes in like the United States now. They just like, they don't pay taxes. They tell the government to fuck off. They like, you know, grow mushrooms and just live out in the woods and mind their own business. And that's definitely like a thing I get into arguments with more like reactionary right-wing libertarians that are like, communism can never be allowed to exist, whatever. And it's like, you don't think under even like the most government instituted libertarianism that there wouldn't be people that would do commie stuff. Like, of course they are. And you're going to use violence against them to stop them from doing that. Then are you a libertarian then? You know?
Yeah. Like, I got in an argument. I got in an argument with a guy who claimed to be an ANCAP, and he called himself a voluntarist all the time. And I got
was he a helicopter ANCAP? Because helicopter ANCAPs are the worst.
No, he wasn't that kind of guy. I didn't know him that well. I just ran into him. And so, but I was talking about Tehran, and he was like, well, it sounds like communism. And I'm like, well, it's more syndicalism or mutualism, but like whatever, like however you want to say it, sure, whatever. And he goes, yeah, but that's communism. And I'm like, but it's voluntary. Like, who fucking cares? Nobody's being forced to cooperate here. This is all voluntary cooperation. I don't understand what your fucking problem is. Like, it makes no sense to me.
it's just knee-jerk tribalism, which is like the thing I fight against the most. I don't give a damn what anybody fucking calls themselves or what their political ideology is or whatever. Like, if we agree on stuff and you're not an asshole, then let's go. Like, that's all. And that's how it works in the real world before like everything got way political. Of like, you went to the local gas station to pick up a pack of smokes, and you didn't fucking care what the gas station owner's like political beliefs were. Like.
Yep. All right. Now I want to talk about Garret Foster. I don't want to get bogged down into what happened to Garret Foster too much, because I kind of think in the situation, the way that the situation happened, both guys were in the wrong. To some degree.
I mean, like Garret is literally like a friend of mine, and I don't even like have a reactionary like, oh my god, the driver was such a fucking scumbag and blah blah blah. Like, it was just an awful situation.
Yeah,
it was a shit happens kind of situation, you know.
Yeah, I think Garret made some mistakes, and I think earlier in the day he was videoed saying some shit about these motherfuckers won't do shit or whatever, and he's kind of got a little away from himself, which we've all kind of gotten ahead of ourselves on some shit.
A lot of people forget that when he's talking there, he's primarily talking about like the cops.
Is that who he's talking about? See, I didn't know that. He was talking about because in Austin they had shut down a lot of
peaceful BLM protests extremely violently and done a lot of fucked up things like drive-by pepper spraying protesters, like literally just 80 miles per hour with a police cruiser and just hose the whole crowd with pepper spray and then drive away. Yeah. And that's when he started going down there, and that's what he was talking about, of like which is the same thing I say all the time, that the cops won't fuck with you if you have a gun.
Right.
Now that's not what ended up unfortunately happening to Garret, but
right.
Like,
yeah.
You know?
Well, and the thing is, the guy that ended up killing Garret, there's also been, I think it was a tweet or a Facebook post that he had posted saying that if he runs into one of these protests and these protesters get in his face, he's gonna defend himself no matter what that
Which
means.
again, like both him and Garret, it's just like macho man shit talking.
Right.
Like a lot of people on both sides read into it way fucking deeper than like the reality of like people just talk shit. You know?
What I think is both of these dudes, I don't know how old Garret was, like about 30, I'd say.
He was 28. He was 28.
Okay. Yeah. I knew he was younger. Both of these guys, you know, this is a testosterone fused situation. You got two, you know, one guy, the guy that was in the car was former military, and
same with Garret. Garret's also
ex-military. Oh, was he also a vet? Okay. Yeah. So you got two vets. I mean, Jesus. This is just an explosive situation. Like I said, I think both of them were in the wrong to a degree. Both of them, I think. And it's just the way I looked at it. I was like, this guy should have known, being from Texas, you don't walk up to a car in Texas with a gun. You don't know who in Texas is carrying a gun. Mm-hmm. And this other dude shouldn't have been trying to drive through the damn protest. I mean, like, obviously. So there's this whole like situation where I'm looking at it. I'm like, I can't really take a side here. Like,
yeah, that's the same with me. Of like, I obviously I mourn Garret very heavily, and he kind of like was one of the like sort of quote, for lack of a better term, kind of martyrs or North Stars of like the Boogaloo movement, because he was an avid libertarian. He was one of the first dudes that like wanted to reach out to Antifa and stuff like that. And he, you know, really involved in his community and homeless outreach. He was kind of famous in his community for like doing a lot of homeless outreach and helping the local homeless community, which is why they were like came out in numbers to his funeral. And like, obviously, you know, like there's all of that to where I agree with you, even though that like I feel like the guy was probably just checked the fuck out and just autopilot driving and just pulled into the crowd and fucking panicked. And then Garret, you know, he's pushing his, you know, disabled wife in a wheelchair through the intersection, and a fucking car just comes flying up. So he's all like, "Yo, bro, what the fuck?" and comes walking up, and then, you know, yeah, it's just a shitty situation. Like I don't try to put evil intent on either side, like a lot of people are desperate to do. I just view it as wrong place, wrong time, wrong people, wrong situation, just shit show.
Well, yeah, you know? and like you were just saying, and this is kind of what I wanted to touch on, is Garret sounded like a good dude. He sounded like a beautiful human being that was really trying to promote freedom and do what's best for, you know, society as a whole, as far as expanding freedom for everyone.
Yeah, and he's an on the ground libertarian, which I'm like, even though I'm part of like the LP and everything, I'm very critical of libertarians of too often we're like in our house, like just talking shit, and we don't ever actually apply our principles and go out and do things to where Garrett's like, well, the government won't take care of homeless people. I'm going to fucking go take care of homeless people. Right. Like, you know, the government won't protect protesters. I'm going to go out and do that. And that's kind of like what I want the LP to be, more like a Garret Foster type person of like, go take our worldview of like we don't need the government and go prove it to people, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. And, you know, I thought like, it just felt like you had some really nice things to say about him, and that he was probably more of an inspiration than he's getting credit for because of the circumstances around his death.
Yeah, and the like the cognitive dissonance between like the Twitter left that are still like adamant about calling us neo-Nazis around the Foster situation is a lot of people forget the timeline of that, where Foster died and then Vice News and CNN and, you know, the Blaze and like all of these left-wing places were eulogizing him and putting him up on a pedestal. And it was like very similar to what they did to the medic guy that got shot by Rittenhouse. that
Yes.
lived, had his arm. Very same thing of like placing him on a pedestal and like Garret Foster is such an inspiration to the community and like we should mourn him and everything. And then it came out that he was a Boogaloo boy, and they just fucking stopped talking about him.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have pull in Austin still, and like a lot of Austin like anti-fascist organizations and BLM organizations are more friendly to us than like the broader left, because they knew Garret Foster, they knew he was a Boogaloo boy, they knew what he did, so they kind of had like this firsthand experience with us, and then the propaganda didn't really hit them as hard because they did a giant memorial for him for like 5 days. They protested for him, and everybody knew he was a Boogaloo boy. But the media didn't, and then as soon as the media found out about it, they just stopped talking about him, which is a slap in the fucking face, you know. So,
what you said you knew some people that were on the ground up there in Kenosha. What do you make of that whole Rittenhouse situation?
I think what pisses me off the most about the Rittenhouse situation is that the people that are most to blame for what happened, in my opinion, do not get talked about at all, and that is the Kenosha Guard. Because if you look at the timeline of what happened, Kyle Rittenhouse shows up with the Kenosha Guard, which is, you know, like the right-wing Trumper militia dudes that were there. Kyle Rittenhouse runs away from the Kenosha Guard to go grab the fire extinguisher to put out the dumpster. The Kenosha Guard leave. So a bunch of grown-ass adult men leave a fucking 17-year-old in a riot alone. Like, they were responsible for him, they're with him, he was with them, and they just leave him. Which that's what causes the whole clusterfuck. You know, that's the whole thing kicks off from that moment when Kyle is abandoned by these people.
Right.
So like that, I try to focus on that so much more because nobody talks about that of like, hey, where did the like 30 militia dudes at that gas station just disappear to, you know? Because you see him standing with all of them and then he's alone being chased. Yeah. So it's like, bro, are you kidding me? Like I wouldn't leave friends at a music festival, you know?
Yeah.
In that fucking situation. And then the two guys I had on the ground, if you go back and watch the video, it's my friend Luke and then another individual. They were the ones that were grabbing the Kenosha Guard and like grabbing them by the back of their plate carriers and literally pulling them, yelling at them to go the fucking side. Because the whole point they were there was to defend the gas station, yet they were out in the streets getting into like fucking arguments and like pushing matches and shit with protesters. So Luke's like, go inside. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to cause something to happen, which is what happened, you know? Like you know, you didn't hear fist fights between dudes that were standing on roofs or like in front of buildings or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the only reason the Kenosha situation happened is because they went out and they found this antagonistic group of assholes, and then they were antagonistic group of assholes to each other, and it caused fucking violence.
Yeah, because I felt bad for Kyle. Like whenever the whole thing happened, I was watching, I was like, and this kid didn't have a clue what the fuck he was doing.
Yeah, and that's because he was left there. And like again, like I have my personal opinions on Kyle. I'm not like the biggest fan of him for other things that he's done and has done since. But like at the end of the day, that to me is something nobody focuses on and needs to be talked about more. Of the fact that none of that would have happened if the Kenosha Guard didn't leave and just leave a 17-year-old alone in a riot.
Right. Well, and I see. I didn't know that. The way I understood it, he was there with another friend of his.
But they linked up with the Kenosha Guard.
Okay, see, I wasn't aware of that. All right, see, because I was blaming his mom because I was like, why would the fuck?
Again, like his mom also fucking dropped him off there, so that's another thing.
I was like, why the fuck would you drop your kid off in the middle of the fucking riot? Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's ridiculous because like I said, like the timeline is you see Kyle like walking around the protest and like doing things, whatever. We all saw that, and then he's at the gas station with the Kenosha Guard and with Luke, and he's like involved with all the bullshit that's going on.
Right.
And then you see him run off, and then the next time you see Kyle, all of the Kenosha Guard are gone.
Right.
They've disappeared. They've disappeared in the vapor. So like, where's your fucking fire team, bro? Where's your battle buddies? Like, are you literally just alone?
Exactly.
And that's because they left. And it's like, wow, you fucking scumbags. Like, I would never do that. Even when I showed up to Lansing at January 17, which was like, there's cops everywhere. Nothing could have possibly happened. One of my BLM contacts got separated from me. And I was telling reporters like, hang on, I can't give my speech yet. I have to go find somebody. And I spent like 10 minutes running around until I found her. Because that's not even just like protests. Like that's what you're supposed to do at like music festivals, you know? Or like a sports game.
Right.
So that pisses me off to no end. And I hate how like the Kenosha Guard don't ever even get talked about in that situation anymore.
Yeah.
And that's such a more important fuck up to me, because that caused everything. That was the start of everything, was them, leaving him isolated in the middle of fucking everything going on.
Right. And then after he was isolated and he's getting chased around, I mean, a gunshot goes off. The kid flips around and he shoots a guy that's like right there on top of him trying to grab the barrel of his gun. Like, I'm like, the kid should have never even been in the fucking situation.
Right.
That's
what I tell the left wing people of, like, I think the first shooting was justified because of everything that happened. I think that's legit. But then I go even further of, like, a lot of people on the right don't like when I say this, but a skateboard dude and medic dude are fucking brave, because they had no idea what was going on. They were blocks down the street and all they hear is there's a fucking active shooter, and hearing gunshots, and some kid is hauling ass down the road with a rifle. And they try to stop him. And I'm like, okay, that's dumb, honestly, but at the end of the day, like, to me, that is brave, because they thought that somebody was going around shooting people and they tried to stop it. And they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what happened at the gas station. They weren't involved at all. Like, they were totally separate. So, like, I don't think it's like, to me, it's very similar to the Garret Foster thing, to where, like, the second shooting is just a confluence of shitty fucking situations,
Yeah, when it came to the second shooting, I didn't look at it the way you're looking at it. I can kind of see where you're coming from. My whole thing was, all right, the kid's running, and he's saying, I'm going to go get help. And he's running towards the police line, which is down the road, why they were so far away from everything that was going on. That's another fucking issue.
Yeah, there's actually another story involved with that actually involves the Kenosha Guards. We can hit on that after this.
Oh, okay.
Of another lost detail of Kenosha.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So he's running down saying, I'm going to get help. I'm going to go get the cops. And so he's running towards the line of police, which are down like 2 blocks down the road or whatever. And this dude in a white hat runs up behind him and like punches him from behind. This is whenever he kind of loses his balance and falls over. This is when skateboard dude comes up and tries to hit him. He gets shot. And the other dude has the gun, and kind of acts like it. And he's like, oh, fuck. And then he comes at him again. And that's when he gets his bicep blown off. So it was kind of like, if the kid's saying, I'm going to go to the cops, I'm on my way to the cops, like, okay, and just follow him down there. You don't have to fucking go and knock the shit out of him. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I can somewhat agree with that, but I still do like hold the belief, that clusterfuck situations, we can always ad hoc whenever guns are involved. We can always ad hoc rationalizations afterwards. But like, I just put myself in medic dude's mind of like, I'm just standing there doing my fucking street medic thing. And I just hear a bunch of people screaming, active shooter, he's fucking killing people. And I see a dude run by with a rifle.
Yeah.
Like, what would I do in that situation? And I might have done the same thing. I've been like, stop that motherfucker, like, okay, yeah, I can maybe not, maybe so, but like, I don't think, they're saints or anything, but I kind of like, just with the Garret Foster thing, I view it as that is a clusterfuck. However, bald dude that got capped in the parking lot, he was a fucking scumbag. And,
yeah, he was up in their face saying, shoot me, motherfucker, like long before any of this. I mean,
yeah, he was
literally asking for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I fall on that. And then the other important detail on the Kenosha thing is there's a clip that goes around, and you can look this, to where the leader of the Kenosha Guard, after the protest, walks up to the BLM organizers and they start having a conversation. And the Kenosha Guard dude is like, the police walked up to me and said that we're going to push the protest to you and then you can deal with them. So that's why the cops were so checked out, is because the police were deliberately pushing protesters towards the militia members that were like a mile away from the fucking event, hoping something would happen, essentially. And there's multiple clips of like cops saying to other people, including Kyle, of like, you guys will deal with them.
Jesus.
Which is like, and again, like people forget that, like, so there you have a Trump like 3%er militia dude sitting there with BLM activists after the event, talking to each other and being like, wait, was this all a fucking setup?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like the whole Charlottesville thing, where they just kind of where they just funneled both groups together into like one big fucking mishmash and say, hey, have fun. Yeah, and then you end up with that woman getting run over, which was a total fucking nightmare. It's like these I don't, like you said, it's almost as if they're intentionally creating these conflicts and pushing these people up against each other, knowing that eventually it's just going to pop off. When you have so much emotion running, you're eventually going to get that explosion. And
yeah, and
like counting on it.
Yeah, they want it because, you know, chaos breeds authority in a lot of instances. And like, you just have to think about the conversation of that meeting to where that's 30 minutes after, well, one of theirs shot 3 of theirs, you know? And, but so if you look at it that like, that shouldn't be happening. Something else must be going on for the fact that they would be comfortable enough to walk up to him with still in full kit, still with a rifle, and have a conversation, because I think a lot of people on the ground notice like something fucking weird is going on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a lot of people forget that like there's almost constant gunfire in the back of all of those videos. We never talk about that. Who's shooting at what? And then you have a video of a black business owner that talked about that right after the Kyle situation happened, that there was pickup trucks of dudes that pulled into Kenosha and like jumped out with rifles and shit and like went into the neighborhood. And nobody knows who those guys were. That guy is not the only like on the ground reporter that mentioned seeing like armed men, unidentified men just showing up in Kenosha. We'll probably never get an answer on who was shooting, who those dudes were.
Yeah.
Like,
what was happening? Yeah.
because everything's focused so hard on that one moment. You know, that picture of Kyle on his back shooting upwards is so seared into people's minds that they have forgotten all the other weird shit that happened at Kenosha.
Yeah. Well, I've never been to any protests, so I can imagine, you know, with the amount of noise and the amount of people, that it could get a little chaotic. Like if you start adding in gunfire and it's after dark,
tear gas, explosions,
exactly.
You know?
Oh my God, you're in a war zone.
And it's like it is a war zone. It's a worse war zone because nobody's got fucking uniforms and nobody knows whose team anybody's on, and you got people pretending to be other people. Like infamously, my friend Tim Teagan got arrested in Detroit because a random dude came up to them with a megaphone. And they were like going on a march. This was like, I think the second or the first night in Detroit where there was riots there. And this dude showed up and he's like, everybody with me. And he led the protest and broke them off from the main march and led them down a road. And then the cops just fucking materialized out of nowhere and arrested everybody.
Jeez.
The dude with the megaphone was an undercover police officer. So
so what is he just funneling them to where?
He was like, oh, I have a megaphone. Everyone with me. We're taking a right here.
Pied Piper.
Yeah, leading them into a cop trap. And it's like, so how many people are running around at these events are undercover cops? And like, it's so complicated. And a lot of people that have never been to one of these events don't even understand that like the peaceful ones are clusterfucks of confusion and he said, she said, and where are we supposed to go? And who is this person? And do we have a permit? Yes, we had a permit. Oh, this one line of the permit doesn't apply to this sidewalk. And now the cops are yelling at us. Are the cops legit or are they full of shit? You know, like, it's a mess.
Right. You got thousands of people. You got thousands of people that don't even know each other, just, coming together and, supposed to be marching for one fucking cause. And they don't even know who's, setting up the march or leading them. Like, the guy with the megaphone, like you could be walking into any number of traps.
Yeah, it's infamously more like, I always use the term like fog of war. Like the fog of war at protests is like super extreme.
Yeah.
Which is funny because one of the things the FBI is going after both anti-fascist organizations and Boogaloo Boys and other groups is for using radios and stuff like that proves intent. Like some form of organization and like whatever. That's one of the things they reference in the memo, to where it's like, no, it's just so it isn't a giant confusing shit show.
I just
imagine a Metallica concert, but there's no band. Like that is a protest. It's just a bunch of like aimless wandering people and
making a bunch of noise.
Right.
What are they cheering for? All right, man. The last thing I want to talk about, and it's one of the hardest subjects out there is Ross Ulbricht.
Free Dread Pirate, free him fucking now.
2 life sentences plus 40 years.
And it's so ridiculous. And it's the same thing. Like a lot of people forget that around that same time is when they cracked down on Anonymous, and they were giving like kids that were using, free DDoS software against like banks and whatever. They were giving them like 40-year sentences.
Yeah. A
lot of the original Anonymous people got grabbed over bullshit, over like low level internet activism. And the same thing happened to Ross, to where that whole early 2000s like major crackdown on internet activism or internet groups or stuff like Silk Road.
Mm-hmm.
They all gave extreme charges because they're trying to make examples of people.
Yeah, and it really bothers me because Ross was a Konkin reader. and I don't know if you've ever read any Konkin, but
A little bit.
Konkin's the guy who came up with the idea of counter economic strategies, the agorist, peaceful revolutionary activity through counter economics. So working in your gray markets and your black markets, and that's where the whole idea of the Silk Road came through. So what Ross was thinking he could do is engage with the cryptocurrency world and an agorist website that was run, on the dark web, outside of the reach of the feds. And he created this website so that people could trade amongst each other one-on-one, and he gets caught up as this, mastermind, criminal, and ends up with 2 life sentences plus 40 years.
And a lot of people try to focus on like, oh, the Silk Road, you could go and buy guns and drugs and like all this. They try to make it think that that's what it was all about, when you could buy anything. Like people were selling like paintings and shit on Silk Road. Like it was no different than eBay, really. It's just, obviously there was illicit things you could buy on there.
Right.
But they try so hard to focus on it like it was some shadowy like drug market, when really it was no different than fucking Amazon,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a gray market Amazon. It was an Amazon outside of the scope of government, using a non-approved currency, accepting non-approved currencies. Well, people could decide for themselves. Am I going to accept Bitcoin, Ethereum, or fiat? I'm trying to stay under the radar, so maybe I'm going to be purchasing my products with a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and a lot of libertarians got into it because they didn't want to pay fucking taxes. They wanted to pay taxes on their goods that they were selling or the shit they were buying, so they would use Bitcoin.
Right. So he sets up the website, and then he gets caught up in this whole mess of a sting, and like the name, the Dread Pirate Robert, switches hands several times, and somehow everything that ever happened under that name comes back upon him.
And they try to get like the whole fake hit thing, which has been proven to be bullshit at this point, and that the FBI has like come out and admitted was bullshit. Yep. There's so many corrupt police actions that were buried by the FBI because they wanted to get a charge only to come out later, which is such a recurring theme in fucking everything. Whether you go from the civil rights movement to like Ruby Ridge and Waco to Ross, like if you look at all of these, or Duncan or Breonna, there's all these instances where they lie until they get the conviction, and then the truth comes out.
Right. Yeah, and then one of the worst parts is I heard Lynn say in an interview that the judge told Ross that she wasn't going to take it easy on him because she believed his idea of unlimited liberty was a dangerous ideology.
Yep, exactly. It was directly and explicitly to send a message.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say like if Benjamin Franklin or Lysander Spooner were alive nowadays, they'd probably be sitting in a jail next to Ross Ulbricht. It's probably true. Yeah. Because it's ridiculous that it had nothing to do with what he was doing, and they didn't even mostly get him on drug charges or whatever. It was all, you laughed in our face and shirked our authority, so we're going to crush you, and we're going to let everybody know after you words that this is what happens if you dare to sell an air conditioner or something on Silk Road and not pay taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, it wasn't even that. You allowed somebody to sell an air conditioner on Silk Road without paying taxes.
Right, because they weren't going after like the actual buyers and sellers.
Exactly.
They viewed him as some drug kingpin for hosting a fucking website.
Yeah,
like essentially.
Yeah. He learned to code before it was cool.
Right.
So it's one of the saddest stories I've ever heard.
It breaks my heart that he tweeted out just like yesterday of like, it's been 10 years I've been sitting in here.
Yeah.
Fucking like bright young mind. God knows what crazy shit he would be up to nowadays. He'd probably be like our generation's Elon Musk. My generation's Elon Musk.
He'd be the anarchist Elon Musk.
Right, that's just like crazy, trying new ideas and running new shit. Like, because the kid was brilliant. He was fucking brilliant.
Imagine if he would have ever worked with Cody Wilson on a project. Who knows what would have happened? Yeah. We'd all have nukes by now.
Right. Exactly. I love it. Perfect stuff.
So you
All
said
right.
they came out with a movie. You want to tell us about a little bit about?
Yeah, it was some Hollywood movie. The director was on Joe Rogan yesterday, and like they make it to where Ross, like in the movie, they say Ross did put the hit out, and they make him seem like some crazy drug kingpin, and it pisses me off. Just watching the trailer fucking annoyed me. And even on there, he's like, "Well, I wanted to tell my story," and I talked to Ross, and I said, "If you ever want to tell your story, that's fine." And it's like, okay, so either way, a fuck ton of normies that have never heard of Dread Pirate are gonna watch this movie for the first time and think he tried to fucking assassinate someone. Like, thanks Hollywood. You know?
Yeah, well, I know the 6-part documentary that they released a few years ago. I think it's still out on YouTube, and I'll link to that in the show notes and everything.
Because we're gonna have to like counter intelligence on that so much, because this is gonna be the first time a lot of people heard his story. Because
have you ever seen that doc?
I've seen the documentary.
Yeah, I know we had put it up at the Institute a while back, but I'll have to get with them guys and see if I can't find the link for it, so I can. Yeah, we're gonna have to start spreading that around with them having a movie out there that's going to be smearing his name, which is ridiculous, man.
Yeah, he was so harmless. The fact that people think he put a hit out on someone. Like, you ever heard the kid talk? Like, he's a fucking dork, and he's adorable and like harmless as hell. Yeah. Like, he makes Mark Zuckerberg look like a fucking, functioning human being when it comes to just how like tame and chill and like he is. It just pisses me off. That poor that poor kid. Even though he's not even a kid anymore, he's in his fucking 30s because he's been sitting there for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. We're gonna end on a black pill. Give us a white pill before we get out of here.
Oh yeah. The fact of the matter is that when Barack Obama got elected, left-wing activism died and right-wing activism came back. And then when Trump got elected, right-wing activism died and left-wing activism came back. Now Joe Biden's in and nobody stopped talking. And everybody's still pissed because we all hate the guy. And there's a lot of movements that are working together and connections being made and plans being formulated between groups you would never expect to work together. And I think this is our chance. I think a lot of the government is becoming more and more desperate the closer it comes to its collapse. And we're seeing them be real fucking desperate right now. And I think, hopefully within my lifetime, we might actually finally get some semblance of liberty in this country. So I'm perfectly white-pilled. I think it's great. I think things are going to happen really soon, and they're going to keep fucking up, and we're going to keep winning.
All right, man. You got any plugs? You said y'all had a podcast.
I have a podcast. It's called the United Voluntary Podcast. It's actually run by me, an anti-fascist organizer and a BLM organizer, and we just go issue by issue that we agree upon and like talk about it from our various perspectives and how we can work together on those issues. So that's awesome. And then I go on Mike Bobby's the Mad Liberty podcast every Monday. And that's fun. That's just a bunch of Boogaloo boys getting pissed drunk and bullshitting. Highly recommend. It's super fun. And then I have my own YouTube channel and my own Twitter. That's just Magnus Panvidya. And I just post, rants and memes there. So that's pretty much where you can all catch me.
All right, man. Yeah, I'm going to, I'll make sure we linked all that. I'm going to check out these podcasts that you're on.
Yeah, I definitely, we did an episode on Waco on the Mad Liberty podcast just this Monday. And it was a blast. We it wasn't just about Waco. We talked about how Mr. Potato Head never had a dick, so we don't know why anyone cares. He's apparently trans now and stuff like that. So
I told my buddies, I was like, man, I want to get a Mr. Potato Head that looks like RuPaul with a giant eggplant between his legs.
I love it. Right, yeah, man, I appreciate having me on. I'm actually going on to a gun control debate in 30 minutes. So
all right, brother.
I'll drop a link on Twitter if anyone wants to come immediately over to that.
All right, go kick their ass.
Hell yeah, man. Have a good one.
Right, later.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. Doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the thieves that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Don't feed them cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking